Good morning everyone, and welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. Today we're going to be looking at Cholt by Venger Satanis. Now, this is a review copy of a book, full disclosure, that I was actually sent a while ago, and it's been numbered. Apparently it's 323 of 2000, but like I say, I was sent it a while ago and just didn't get around to reviewing it for one reason or another. Entirely my fault, so I'm hoping to sort that out now. And looking at it, it's a pretty substantial book. We have some lovely artwork with this strange black pyramid on the front with these weird eyeballs and tentacles around it on the sort of dust cover, and it's just over 200 pages long, hardback, full colour. Originally published in 2019. Seems so long ago now. Let's crack it open and see what we have. We obviously have the credits and the contents, which tell us we're going to get an overview, a list of places to visit, factions, adversarial creatures, and various other bits and pieces that we'll hopefully go into as we look through the book. So as we look at the foreword, the author tells us that the largest section of this book is titled The Black Pyramid, and this is a sort of world/mega dungeon focus of this campaign setting. And we're told that everything around it is designed to create a satisfying experience and world for exploring this black pyramid. The author says the PCs won't always be in the pyramid. At some point they'll have to wander the desert or get involved with like shady drug cartel demons, which sounds pretty cool. The setting is described as a non-standard D&D setting where exploration and actually talking to people have a worthwhile sort of aspect to them, and the sort of bizarre interactions with all these strange creatures that populate the land are as much, if not a bigger part of this campaign than the traditional sort of D&D tropes. The author says that when he looks back on it, he detects a note of brutality and cosmic indifference balancing out the somewhat irreverent atmosphere of the campaign. You know, and he says you do what you can to survive, but you don't take it too seriously. Obviously it's a game. Everyone's hoping to have fun. So let's move on from the foreword to the overview, which is the first section. We get a breakdown of the history of Cholt, which according to this section of the book started as a pseudo-medieval land with elves, dwarves, snake men, all the sort of normal tropes you'd expect in D&D, steeped in ancient traditions set forth by those who worshipped the Old Ones, so a bit of that Cthulhu mythos coming through there. The Old Ones are said to be so chaotic and mad they destroyed every possible reality save for this one. Making Cholt their home, they corrupted many, turning them to the darkness. 1,000 years have passed as the Old Ones slept, exhausted from annihilating a multitude of realities, and their slumber ushered in the Tech Age. So gradually this world started to become more developed and create advanced technology. Eventually, of course, as with these sort of cyclical myths, the Old Ones awakened again, realising mortals had forgotten them, technology had replaced superstition and magic and stuff like that. The ancient gods were diminished by a lack of faith, but they still were able to wreak a terrible vengeance on Cholt, destroying many of the domed, wondrous technological cities as subterranean races rose up to reclaim the surface world. However, the surface dwellers didn't go meekly into that good night. They fought back with all the technology they could muster. So it sounds to me like we're basically dealing with a world where we've got a bit of a grab bag with the mythos, traditional fantasy tropes, slightly more advanced technology, sort of sci-fi-ish elements that have all been brought together by this sort of Old One-based apocalypse. We're told that after the apocalypse, all but a few of the Old Ones were killed, their corpses sinking into the sand, their blood or their ichor spilling on the land restored the magic that had previously been lacking and recharged the ominous Black Pyramid. And we've sort of got a, I suppose, a sort of post-apocalyptic scenario here where people are trying to scavenge science and technology from this sort of weird once D&D setting and then sort of sci-fi setting, now fallen back into this sort of barbaric apocalyptic wasteland. And this period in the book is known as the Obsidian Age. We also get a nice little box out on this page telling us that in the ancient tongue, Chult means greatness by the way of suffering. We get some details next on crossing a desert wasteland between the domed city and various other bits of the setting, and a few little bullet points on desert survival. We're told that those wearing metal armour while walking the desert have a 2 in 6 chance of keeling over from exhaustion and heat stroke. Those travelling during the day wearing non-metal armour have a 1 in 6 chance, and those carrying more than 50 pounds of gear, loot or supplies have a 1 in 6 chance of the same. And obviously you can combine them and work that out if more than one of those apply. We're also told, however, unlike most deserts in your standard D&D game, that there is what's called a theta radiation of Chult. We're told it won't kill you, but it may mutate you. So again, we're bringing in mutations, often very popular in old school role-playing games through various forms, but just putting a little bit of a twist on it. We're told, bring in the sort of sci-fi element, that if you plan on crossing the desert waste, you might want to take some radiation pills unless you want some unpleasant surprises. For every 3 consecutive days of travel without pills, you roll a d20. On a result of 1, you get radiation sickness. On 2, 3 or 4, you get a mutation. On 5+, you get no result at all. Radiation sickness produces feelings of lethargy and nausea. You get disadvantage on all rolls until the subject can spend 24 hours resting indoors, away from charred suns where the radiation emanates from. We get a table of interesting mutations, from cactus-like skin to ape arms, giraffe necks, metallic skin, lots of interesting things there. And we get a sort of breakdown of interesting places to visit, from Kra'damek, apologies if I'm pronouncing all these names wrong, which is a magnificent city constructed of obsidian, glass and steel, where everyone's thoughts are controlled by a gargantuan purple demon worm, named in the same way as the city. Jalet, a matriarchy ruled by a council of women known as the Harmonious Validity, who have decreed that masculinity is inherently evil and those born male are inferior to females. Angrybar, the largest city in Chult, vibrant with rich coloured silks, exotic spices and stuff like that, obviously riffing on the name Angrybar. It's ruled by a wise and benevolent king, Drutal, whose wife not only has serpentine blood but infernal ancestry as well. So we're going for your sort of exotic, demon-tainted city vibe here. It's rumoured, apparently, that the king's wisdom and benevolence are mere trickery. Highly placed subjects in Angrybar have testified to King Drutal's furious rage, demanding servants to be tortured so their intolerable screams soothe his majesty. Most of the Obsidian City has been rebuilt since the apocalypse, however there are sections of Angrybar that avoided devastation. There's a mention of the gladiatorial arena. The city also rents or buys transport through the wastelands for those who can't afford it. There's another option. Wealthy nobles organise a sort of race 3 times a year called the Crossing. Those of lower birth are given use of a riding lizard and must go to the Black Pyramid, steal something from that unhallowed place and return to the city. The first person to complete the voyage gets to keep what they've stolen, as well as half the 1,000 gold piece prize pool. So a nice little bit of a plot point there, and giving people a reason, especially like on a tournament or a one-off game, for going to the Black Pyramid. We're told there's one remnant civilization that was spared from destruction in the apocalypse. The domed city houses about 5,000 humanoids, even though we could easily triple that. They're extremely selective about who they let in, so we're sort of playing on the sci-fi trope of that isolated community here, probably with a lot of their technology intact, I wouldn't expect. Yeah, we're told that tech smuggling is a problem for the domed city. There are vaccines in there that could save hundreds of lives, and weaponry that could make one a mighty power in the world. Because of this, security droids driving hover tanks patrol the city for illegals attempting to enter the dome. So yeah, we're really leaning into that sort of futuristic vibe there. And there's mention of cyber surgeons, limb replacements, stuff like that. All sorts of stuff you'd normally associate with your more sort of sci-fi games. We're told one thing that the domed city has that no one else does is the Mind Gate. It's the Chult equivalent of cyberspace, a holographic, collective, unconscious, accessible via the city's wondrous technology. So again, really leaning into those sci-fi tropes. We're told about the Great Sunken Library, which is a repository of all knowledge on Chult, housing books spanning the age of legend to the age of technology. And we're given some brief stats for the scholars or conservatives of the library who protect it with their lives. And this is the first time I've come across the stats in this book. I'm only on page 17. There's a lot of stuff in here, but we get some very simple stats here. We basically get hit dice, attack bonus, how many attacks they do, how much damage they do, AC, hit points, a single save, and a couple of little special things. In this case, that they have phasers which can disintegrate living organisms. If they use it, you have to make a save to avoid. Each phaser has a power pack containing 1d20 uses. So again, sci-fi tropes here. For their treasure, every week they're gifted with food and water by a group from Kra'damek. In exchange, the Purple Priesthood is allowed to borrow library books. Hidden in the lower levels of the library is a power pack charger. With this device, they can charge a power pack in 1 hour. We get various other locations mentioned, from the Crimson Rock of Sacrifice to the Chartreuse Sea and Venger Corso, which is the closest settlement to the Black Pyramid. I'm not going to go into all of these in extensive detail because there's a lot of stuff in here and the review would be massive. I'm just going to dip into a few of them as we go through. We're told Venger Corso is a one-wizard town largely populated by farmers, scavengers and merchants. There's a cantina, of course, so again that sort of Mos Eisley vibe here, you know, wretched hive of scum and villainy. We're told that sometimes at night, when the moon's a high, a terrible sound is heard, an extraterrestrial reverberation that seems to permeate the wasteland. Venger Corso has its own gang of desperados calling themselves Diablo Martyr. They control the drug trade throughout Sukhbar, specifically meth crystals. They provide a dreamlike euphoria and replenish sanity, ideal for those who have been delving into the lower realm. We then get a page of factions for this area. We're told that there are various apocalyptic cults of the old gods lurking in the desert. There's a description of something called skeevers, who are apparently desert pirates who discovered a small fleet of anti-gravity barges, and they now sort of soar across the desert on this scavenge tech. We have hunter-killer droids, which are a remnant from the age of tech. Spice Frackers, which I'm guessing is a sort of Dune vibe. I mean, obviously this was published before the recent sort of furore about the Villeneuve Dune film, but that's certainly what it sounds like to me. Deathstalkers, catch-all name for like roving bands of barbaric murderous humanoids. The Dharma Initiative, a sect containing both sorcerers and scientists working towards a single purpose. They're trying to find a way to travel through time to change the events that led to Chalt's destruction. And we get stats for all of the sort of standard average members you might come across of those various organisations. It's all laid out in a nice, clear 2-column layout with this sort of parchment-like background in sort of quite muted colours with very faint sort of strange script and miscellaneous, probably best not to inquire about, stainage on them. The stats follow the method I described earlier, very simple, and this carries on into the next section, which is called adversarial creatures. And continuing the sort of Dune vibe, we get gargantuan sandworms in here. We also get scorpion devils, who are these giant scorpions the size of a riding lizard. Garthrulls, which are described as an alien dinosaur. And Shaggoths, which are obviously a take on Shoggoths from the mythos. Abominations, which is a catch-all category for weird tentacled things that lurk below the surfaces of Chult and may be connected with the old ones. Gigantic spider droids, which are strange remnants of old war machines littering Chult. And all of these creatures are very interesting, and due to the simplicity of the stats, could be easily taken from here and ported into most OSR systems with little hassle, to be honest. So if you want to have gigantic spider droids appearing to menace your PCs in your game, or you want to drop in some giant sandworms, you'll probably get a lot out of this section. There's a nice random chart which gives you some treasure you might come across when you're looting NPC and monster corpses in this area, and we get a short sort of bullet point list of 6 little magic items that you might encounter here. There's then a section called Particulars, where it starts with the exotic races of Chult. And the author tells us that while the GM can use standard fantasy races, the following are unusual races specific to Chult. And we get a number of different elves, which seems to be a thing in most D&D. I remember back in 2nd ed at AD&D, there seemed to be like an elf of every variety you could imagine under the sun. So here we have infernal elves with crimson skin and black eyes, moon elves, blood elves, sky elves, midnight elves, and sun elves. And each of these has like 3 or 4 bullet points with them describing the particulars of their races. So we'll just pick a couple to look at. So the infernal elves, they have demonic blood, obviously. They take half damage from heat and fire. They gain advantage when lying, bluffing, using intimidation, diplomacy, or when dealing with devils and demons. And apparently we're told that cloaks made from their skin, which is a pretty gruesome idea, provides 5 points of heat and fire protection per round. We also have sun elves, known as gold elves. They live in the desert. It's rumoured they made a bargain with ancient demons in return for the power to harness the sons of Chult. The elves would worship the demons for 1,000 years. They can make their skin shine like golden suns. They heal 1d6 hit points per hour when outdoors under the open sky. In direct sunlight they're invigorated and have advantage. Every 7 months, when all the moons of Chult are gibbous and waning, they must commit a wicked act to appease their infernal master. And although this section says exotic races of Chult, it's pretty much just elves, to be perfectly honest. Which, don't get me wrong, they're nice and thematic and interesting. It might have been nice to see some other stuff in here other than just different flavours of elf. But, you know, different strokes for different folks. We get a chart with some names on here, a bit of discussion about saving throws, and a breakdown of what the advantage and disadvantage mechanic is for those who aren't familiar with it. I'm assuming most people are, but if you're not, having advantage just means you roll 2d20 for your check and you pick the best result. Disadvantage, you roll 2d20 for your check, you pick the worst result. It's a mechanic that's been popularised by D&D 5th edition. We get a little table talking about critical success and failure, where the author says, for simplicity's sake, he's going to say that a natural 20 on attack rolls does double damage. It's up to the GM to decide if the damage dice are rolled or if the maximum damage is doubled. As for critical failures, rolling a natural 1 is not only an automatic miss, it also carries a range of drawbacks, and there's a little 6-entry chart for critical failures. It seems like a nice, simple way of doing it. If you like critical successes and failures, if you don't, it wouldn't exactly be difficult to omit them. So then we move on to a section of the book called Beneath Kra'damek, City of the Purple Demon Worm. And this is the first scenario for Chult. And it seems to me, from what the author says in this, that it's a little bit of an introduction. So rather than jump straight into the mega dungeon, the Black Pyramid, it's just like, I suppose, teaser dungeon to sort of like lead you into the setting, which I think's a good idea. I certainly know that, like, whether you're playing or running it, a mega dungeon can be a very daunting sort of first step into a role-playing or a D&D style game. So I like the idea of a little mini dungeon to introduce some of the concepts that are going to appear later, and then you can sort of allow the players to like dip their feet in the purple tainted waters of Chult before they fully dive in and commit to it. We're told that the dungeon complex beneath the City of the Purple Demon Worm works well for a one-shot convention game or simply as a demonstration of what it's like, and that all magic cast in the dungeon is influenced by the purple crystals embedded in the wall, both rough-hewn caverns and smooth dungeon areas. Roll a d20 and consult a table each time the spell is cast, and it's sort of like a magical mishap table, and this ranges from a roll of 1 where the spell just fails to 6, the pungent odour of carnality and desert lotus blossoming in the eldritch illumination of demon moons fills the air, to 20, a power surge, the spell is doubly effective but the caster is dazed for 2d4 rounds. So this is already starting to lean into the sort of slightly increased weirdness factor that's prevalent through the rest of the book. It does make playing, I suppose, arcanists, spellcasters, whatever you want to call them, wizards, a little bit more hazardous and unpredictable. Whether you like that or not is down to your personal preference. It is very in keeping with the sort of weird fantasy / sci-fi tone that the game is going for, and we've seen random charts like this used in a number of other OSR games that want to enhance that weirdness factor. But again, if for your campaign you didn't want that, wouldn't be particularly difficult to remove. Next is a thing I like very much. We get a full sort of A4 page of noteworthy details where the author breaks down in bullet points a few sort of things you need to know about this little dungeon before you go into it. We're told that purple crystals deaden psionic abilities. We're told that the crystals of Chult have always existed, but their presence was only detected a few thousand years ago. All servants, priests, acolytes, etc. wear purple robes. Periodically, the purple demon worm priesthood imbibe hallucinogenic drugs, so they're easily distracted or misled. There are no sleeping quarters, kitchen or amenities because the priesthood doesn't live here. All rooms within the complex have a gong near the door suspended from the ceiling. Banging the gong will alert the servants of the demon worm that intruders are in there, so an alarm system effectively. We get a recommendation that each player choose either a single third level character or 3 first level characters, so giving you some sort of idea as like the threat level of this dungeon. Glyphs are hand drawn on objects or people. They act as temporary magic and fade away after a single use. There's a 1 in 6 chance of a magic user remembering what the glyph looked like before transcribing it. The arcane process of transcribing a single glyph is about an hour. Talons are triangular coins stained purple. One side has an image of the demon worm, the other an eye surrounded by a diamond. 3 talons are worth 1 gold piece. Greater demons deprived of Zoth sleep far below the shifting sands. They are dormant half-breed spawn of the old ones who want to make pacts with intelligent creatures, and we get some stats for that. And I really love the fact that we've got this page which sums up this noteworthy stuff that you need to know. I think when and if I run this, I'd probably print out that page or take a copy of it so I could have that sat next to me while I was using the book to run the actual dungeon, and it'd be very handy just to look at as a quick refresher. I think this is a great thing, and I think more people should do it, just giving you a little summary of these details before you delve into it. We next get a city background on Kra'damek, the city of the purple demon worm. We're told that the demon worm itself arrived on Chult nearly a century ago when the planets aligned and a gate opened. The people of the city have forever been destroyed by its arrival, not because of any direct harm it caused, but because it warps their minds, draining their identity and imposing its own thoughts on them. It's rumoured that at the centre of the city is a chamber of purple crystals that direct and focus the demon worm's will. Beneath it is a cavern and dungeon protecting the creature's secrets, including a way to resist its mind control. Infidels sometimes hide in the caves beneath the city. So we've got an intriguing prospect set up there for a potential way to rebel or fight back against this seemingly all-powerful creature. The entry point, the sort of de facto starting point of this dungeon, is that a tremendous solar storm has torn through Chult, running into the city of the purple demon worm, and it's temporarily diminished the demon world's abilities to mind control everyone in the city. This means that the player characters and dozens more are temporarily free, but due to years of subservience to the demon worm, they're literally got only the clothes they're wearing. Knowing that the desert wastes outside are exceedingly harsh, they've decided to scavenge what they can from the dungeon complex below and maybe get a little bit of revenge on the way. So this is a great start if you just wanted to drop people straight in with just like a boom, you're in the dungeon, let's go. You've been under the control of the demon worm for umpteen years, your identity's been suppressed, you don't really know what's going on. Now suddenly you're free. What do? You've just got your clothes, you know some basic information about the area, let's go. And that would be great for a convention scenario, especially if you really like a games on demand style thing where you just want to drop people straight in and just get straight to the fun bit of the adventure. We then get a fairly standard sort of dungeon summarization where a number of areas are expressed in more detail. I'm just seeing if there's an actual map of this and where it's located. I assume there must be because it's a dungeon, obviously. Yeah, on page 46 there is a map taking up a whole page which shows a mixture of circular sort of worked chambers and obviously created chambers, including one with an ominous looking dark pit in the centre of it. And these, as is often the case in these sort of old school dungeons, runs into more natural caverns. There appears to only really be a single entrance to this dungeon, but there's a number of branching passageways, and it's nice to see there are several changes of elevation represented by staircases in the worked area, or sort of natural rises and falls of the landscape in the more natural caverns. That's always an interesting thing to see in dungeons. It makes them feel a bit more like a sort of realised space, and it also gives more potential for interesting encounters, fighting on staircases and that sort of thing. The art style is very appealing. It's surrounded by these sort of strange purple symbols, but it's still very clearly presented with small purple diamonds with numbers in to delineate clearly the different areas that are detailed in the prior chapter. The only thing I might like to see is maybe some sort of smaller versions or sort of zoomed in areas of the maps alongside the more detailed descriptions of specific areas, just so you know where they are, to prevent having to flip backwards and forwards through this section whilst you're running the dungeon. However, if you're running it on a virtual tabletop where you've got the map up in front of you, that's not a problem. Or if you're running it in a sort of real life environment, you could just have a printed copy of the dungeon map, and like I say, it's only on one page, so that's really a minor quibble at best. The dungeon itself is a sort of funhouse mixture of the demonic horrors you'd expect to be lurking in such a place, given the earlier description. A number of sort of sci-fi bits and pieces, like a protocol droid is scattered in there. There's a few nods to Lovecraft, like the Resonator, a machine that allows you to see into different dimensions, as well as various other people who have also been freed by recent events from the mind control of the purple worm and are trying to find their own way out of the dungeon, and who could be either antagonists or potential allies of the player characters, depending on how things go. They might also function as handy replacement player characters should you lose some characters along the way, which, given some of the traps and random arcane effects in here, seems pretty likely. There's also a few intriguing random elements here, my favourite being one of the areas where there's a tear in the fabric of reality, and looking into that, you basically roll on a random table and things could happen, like you slip 1 or 2 moments back in time to approximately 17% of a child's population just vanishing to elsewhere. We don't know exactly where. Whether you like these random elements or not is down to your personal preference, but it is a feature of old school play, and it's certainly something that I enjoy personally. One thing I've noticed as reading through this starter dungeon is there's, beyond the sort of little tidbits at the start about, getting revenge or sort of like delving into the dungeon, there's no real sort of aim or overall goal for it. It's literally, here's a dungeon, delve into it, you might want some sweet revenge against the priest of the purple worm or the purple worm itself, the demon worm, but go find treasures, do what you want, experiment with the setting, learn what it's about, just have fun with it. And some people might find the lack of an overall goal a little bit of a problem. There's no sort of major story goal here, but it's just a good, simple, fun dungeon with some sort of strange elements in to gently introduce you to the mix of sci-fi, fantasy and horror elements that are going to be featured in the rest of the campaign, and I think it serves really well as an introduction to this. Okay, so the next section we have is the Inside the Frozen Violet Demon Worm section. And the start of this says most NPCs have a history and some reason for being inside Kra'damek, which is obviously the demon worm that the town is named after. And it seems to me that this might sort of be a follow-on or a resolution to the previous sort of mini dungeon, but also the way it's presented makes me think that, well, it could probably work on its own without too much
trouble. We get a random NPC details table for determining things like alignment, how long they've been inside the demon worm, their personality, what their agenda is, everything from stealing a starship and seeing the galaxy to taking revenge on desert pirates, and the distinguishing features. Again, we get that lovely 1A4 page of important notes and points to keep in mind while you're running it. And these are things like the violet worm having no psionic abilities while it's frozen, the demon worm swallowing its food whole, and there's a dice roll mechanic in here for judging when the worm starts to thaw out and become a little more active. We get a table for psionics, and we're told that approximately 10% of humanoids in Chult have psionic abilities. The following are possible with accompanying vitality costs, and these just appear to be a list of very simple powers, telepathy, mind control, levitate, stuff like that. Very simple descriptions, and each time they're used they cost a certain amount of hit points. We then go on to the actual breakdown of the dungeon, and it's done in a very similar way to the previous, with numbered areas detailing the antagonists and the items you might hope to find there. I do particularly like the little sort of descriptive bit at the start of the first area, the entrance, the mall as it were, and it says here, the city is in chaos. The purple priesthood were very recently overtaken by the ultraviolet revolution, who now call themselves the violet priesthood. Additionally, with the demon worm's psionic dominance interrupted due to the polar vortex, the citizens finally have their own will. So it sets up this sort of conflict very nicely. And there's some great full page artwork as we scroll through here, and all the statistics are in the very simple style that we would expect to see from earlier in the book. Let's have a look if we've got a map. I expect it's going to be at the end. Yeah, and we've got a lovely map at the end which shows the outline of this demonic worm and the sort of insides of it. To be honest, from here it just looks like a very massive, large chamber with a lot of like smaller chambers coming off the outside of it. So I don't know that it's going to be the most interesting dungeon to explore unless I'm missing something. It seems what they're trying to do, what the author's trying to do during this, is more sort of set up using the sort of dungeon framework, set up an area where there's various factions like sun elves, cultists and stuff like that, and that the majority of the interest in this would come from the interplay between these factions rather than the traditional sort of winding labyrinthine tunnels of a dungeon. We then move on to the next section, which is Gamma Incel Cantina. And we're told that Chult is one of the out-of-the-way fringe worlds that you don't hear much about. It's a planet that developed a long time ago, but something happened a century back. Since then, it's regarded as an up-and-coming flyover planet that you'd probably best avoid. However, recently, some precious resources have been discovered on Chult, and we really sort of get the certainty that there's a bit of a June vibe going on here when we're told that it homes the rare mineral Melange spice. Well, obvious nod to June there, very nicely done. And this has put Chult back in the crosshairs of all the smugglers and people who want to make riches from this item. We get a breakdown of it, and we're told that the natives know it as Zoth. So this is what was referred to when we mentioned Zoth earlier on, when we're talking about the old ones being deprived of Zoth and sleeping. Although it would have been nice perhaps to have some sort of reference for terminology at the start, rather than having to wait until you're like 67 pages in the book to get a bit of clarification on that. We're told it's considered magical and even divine by the primitives inhabiting Chult, although few understand its true work. It has raw quantum energy locked within it and can produce wondrous effects beyond powering starships and particle beam weaponry. Scholars consider the substance a fifth element. Again, another lovely sci-fi nod there. Sustained intake can grant godlike powers. It's both physically and psychologically addictive. We get a brief description of the club, this Mos Eisley style cantina camouflaged by a cloaking field, and we get details of what's inside there. So, and basically this seems to me like a sort of a series of tables to determine who the NPCs are. They're handily color coded, so you can get their sort of faction breakdown, and then we just get like a few very simple sort of sentences describing the other areas, like restroom, roll 3d100 anytime you want to know who's in there. A roll of 70 plus means there's one less person in the restroom. The bar, this is where patrons get their drinks, everything from space tequila to pineapple infused rum blasters. Excellent stuff, just what you need to know. The patrons, it's actually one large table now that I look at it, that is, let's see how many entries there are 69 entries on it by the look of it, and like I say, various sections of it are sort of split off and color coded, so you can see what sort of aliens belong to which faction. And these range from people like Caleb, a human with laser blue face tattoos, who is a replicant mercenary looking for action. Yerk, a scruffy human with stained overalls. He's a tech specialist doing side work for Sexual Performance Arts and Terrorist Cell, Tangerine Wet Dream. Again, we're seeing lots of pop culture. I say pop culture. I'm in my 40s, I don't know what pop culture is anymore. But there's a lot of references to culture in here, sort of like real world culture. We then carry on. We've got Josiah Doon, human male medical officer on shore leave, wearing acid wash jeans and Sex Panther cologne. They're telepathic. And on the next page, we have a full page photo, bit of artwork of a woman sort of decked out like some sort of desert sci-fi fantasy space pirate, which pretty cool. Got a very sort of Mad Max vibe going on with that. We have a page called Aftermath, where it says, after a couple of standard hours, a mysterious and beautiful woman with pink dreadlocks, presumably the woman off the previous page, mechanical eye and exotic armour, 10 assault droids surround her as they enter the cantina. And she basically throws down this gauntlet as to like who is brave enough to enter the Black Pyramid and steal the sacred sanguine orchid from the sorcerer priest Thoth Amon, a ruthless serpent man ruler within the mega dungeon. And there's some storyline there about her daughter being weak and she needs an elixir made from it. Basically, it's your sort of quest giver NPC. We get a D100 random ability scores table, so you can quickly just like roll once on this table and it will give you an array of all your ability scores. And then we get some other tables related to generating characters. And finally, in the same style as earlier, after this section, there is a little sort of map showing the cantina. For my money, it's not as interesting as some of the other maps, but it is essentially just a place with a few rooms and a lot of tables and cupboards scattered around. So how exciting can you really make it look? But still interesting as a little waypoint, and also as a potential setup for exploring the actual mega dungeon. We then move on to the next section, which is the Black Pyramid itself, the main event, the mega dungeon of the setting. Now, I'm not going to go through this in all detail because this takes up pretty much the majority of the book. I mean, it runs from sort of page 82 up to page 199. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'm going to skim through it quickly and give you a sort of a few selected highlights of it. So to start off, we get a brief history describing it as the obsidian jewel of Chalt's demon crown. We're told that in some cultures, those who dared trespass into the Black Pyramid were skinned alive for their blasphemy. In other cultures, journeying into the pyramid was part of an initiation process. So you can sort of tweak it to your own particular sort of preferences in this game. Apparently, the Great Library, before it sank into the sand, had many volumes about the Black Pyramid or Chosa Menenka. All were burned by black-robed priests. These priests, presumably the Keepers of Doom, were rumoured to have gouged out their eyes and ripped out their tongues after witnessing the true nature of the Black Pyramid. So again, leaning into that Cthulhu vibe. We get a small table that you can roll on for motivations for player characters being there. We also have a nice sort of little stat block for like generic hostiles, which I presume is just like desert nomads and stuff like that that might be roaming around. We then get an aftermath page, which is a little bit odd since we've not actually got into the actual dungeon yet. We had a table of rumours about the Black Pyramid. Love a good rumour table. There's a table here called While You Were Away. Adventurers who spend extended periods of time exploring the Black Pyramid may find things have changed upon their return. So that's a nice little thing, you know, to give the idea of the passage of time. And it also sets up the Black Pyramid as an area that you're going to be exploring on multiple occasions, and it's going to be a repeated part of your campaign world. Strange phenomena may occur when you leave the pyramid due to time dilation, so there's a table for that as well. We get a wandering monster table which has such horrors as the crab raccoon, which is what it sounds like. It's a crustacean with a raccoon head. The caterpillar wizard, a human-headed caterpillar. Snake hand, a serpentine creature that ends in a hand rather than a head. Rat things, magenta oozes, shambling amorphous creatures from beyond the stars. Cultists, slimes, night clowns, a bit reminiscent of killer clowns from outer space. Bat-winged eyeballs, hunter-killer droids, centipedes, fruit folk, NPCs, various random like sensory inputs, screams, howls, etc. A pizza pit delivery. Someone delivering a pizza to the Black Pyramid, which I think is pretty funny. And then we get a list of NPCs. We're told that although there's many already populating the Black Pyramid, there are 20 more that can be introduced or used as you see fit. And that's a nice little extra bonus in there. Some ready-made NPCs you can drop in if you roll an NPC encounter on the random monster table, or if you just need something to move the game along a bit. We're told that over time, the denizens of the Black Pyramid have developed a sort of insular religion outside the confines of law and chaos, and we get some details on the various gods and deities they worship. We get a breakdown on some of the sort of factions inside the dungeon, and we're told that in the Black Pyramid there are no coincidences. Eventually the PCs will see patterns linking one thing to another. Some kind of picture will most likely form, conceptualizing the Black Pyramid in ways the players can understand. That's normal for human beings. We try and make sense of seemingly random stuff. If the players or their characters see a connection, just go with it. Good advice for GMs, particularly in this sort of crazy, like wacky setting that is Chult. It's natural for the PCs to want to find some sort of resolution, solution, or understanding of it. I think the advice to just go with it isn't bad as far as it goes. We're told that each room, except for the starting room, has a single luminous line running along the top near the ceiling. The colours are separated into room areas or territories. Going in and out of blue rooms is no problem, but the other colours require an access crystal in order to enter them. This reminds me very much of the older D&D module, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, where you explored a spaceship and you needed various access codes, etc. It also reminds me, like when you go to hospitals or sort of like buildings like that, where people need to get where they're going in a hurry, but they're quite sort of large and labyrinthine, and they will often have these coloured lines sort of pointing you in the direction of various departments. So I think that's an interesting little addition. We're told that these luminous lines are actually troughs or rain gutters of Zoth, creating ambient light. You could fill a vial or two of Zoth for yourself if you want without disrupting anything. Then we get a bit more of a breakdown on Zoth, which is the Ichor of the Great Old Ones, as we discovered earlier. Even though few of them are alive, still slumbering, most died in the apocalypse, their vitality soaking into the interior of Chult. It's this eldritch blood that has re-energized and reinvigorated magic in the setting. It can be used to increase the potency of spells. It can be used to like oil weapons and provide them with a magical bonus. It can be used to recharge wands. It's volatile, so lobbing it at someone, you can use it as a grenade effectively. If refined, it transmutes into the spice melange, which increases vitality and allows you to double your lifespan whilst inoculating the consumer against a variety of diseases. However, each time Zoth is used or handled, there's a 1 in 6 chance of developing Zoth toxemia. Those who've developed it only have 24 hours to live, unless they get some very high level magic or items used on them. We get some general information about the connections between the rooms and what sort of loot you can expect to find in the Black Pyramid. And we get a table which, if you want to go back to the Black Pyramid on subsequent occasions, gives you additional things that might be happening. So like a random event chart, basically. And then we have the details of the various rooms. And I'm not going to go into these in detail, as I said earlier, because there's far too many of them. And I don't want to spoil the surprise for anyone who's going to run this. But this really is sort of like pressing the foot firmly down on the throttle pedal of the Funhouse style dungeon, where the author has taken a number of concepts from various different genres, like say primarily fantasy, horror, sci-fi, but also with references to sort of like modern culture, and has dropped them in this Funhouse dungeon. So we have everything from a playhouse where an insane human is running around a garishly coloured room, laughing manically while talking to various mannequins, to a tiki bar, we have a room called Videodrome, obvious reference there, where black-robed humanoids are basically abusing each other in a Cenobite / Hellraiser style fashion. We have a cheeky reference to pop culture podcasts here, where an overweight bearded man, don't know who could be talking about that, has been sat at a desk in the middle of a room talking to a microphone. Across him is the man he's interviewing, Korg the Conqueror. And we have many and various sort of full-page photo artworks of people dressed as like orcs, barbarians, or warriors. We have a marketplace, people playing dice games, an extra-dimensional creature that looks like an ordinary 3-headed worm, you know, because they're really common, with tentacles and a scorpion tail, but it phases in and out of existence. We have the Temple of Thoth Amon, where a dozen servants attend to the every whim of the sorcerer priest, sitting on his chartreuse throne of calcified Zoth, feeding him grapes and calling him with a palm or frond. So again, a bit of that Conan vibe going on there. Very nice. We also have a chamber called Science Knows Best, containing members of an elite society wearing green uniforms who regard themselves as intellectual superiors who have the right to rule everyone else. They have effectively a lot of what we consider to be like vintage but sort of quite out of place technology, and they're sort of exposing people to strange films and sort of sensory stimuli as part of some sort of experiment and an attempt to construct a high-tech device. They apparently have constructed a device that tracks and disintegrates magic items. Once they have enough followers from these savages, these people they're brainwashing with this visual stimuli, they're going to make their demands known to everyone with a pyramid. Those who refuse to hand over their magic items for destruction will be destroyed themselves. And eventually, on page 199, we move on to the Afterword. And one of the things I like about this is it says that running Chult is not about control, accuracy, or preparation. It's not a series of encounters that requires a delicate balance of character classes, feats, and consumables to circumnavigate successfully. Rather, it's about letting go, living in the moment, embracing the unknown, the miraculous, the horrific, the comedic, and the deadly. It's about wandering through the rusting graveyard of pop culture and beating the shit out of whatever you find there. Which, do you know what? That sounds pretty entertaining to me. And I know a lot of people don't really like these sort of strange or out of place genre mixing elements in their games, but they were always dropping sci-fi into like D&D and stuff in the very earliest editions, especially back in the day when the walls of the genres hadn't calcified quite so much. And I'm a big fan of it. I've run games where there's been like mecha discovered in like sitting against mountains with fantasy villages growing around their feet and all sorts of stuff like that, and I've always found it really entertaining and no way to the detriment of the games that I've run. So last thing before I talk about what I think about the book is the appendix, where we get the Crimson Dragon Slayer D20 rules. And this is the iteration of Venger's sort of cut down, simplified rules that he uses to run old school modules and his own game. Again, we get one of these lovely simplified overviews, and we're told there's no character sheets. Instead of using modifiers, you either have advantage or disadvantage. One round is approximately 1 minute of game time. Combat is abstract, not granular, so when it's your character's action, you can move, talk, and take one action in any order. Instead of rolling initiative, whichever side would logically strike first goes, and then the opposition goes. If there's no clear victor, a tie goes to the player characters. Every PC gets 1 point of inspiration, a la 5th edition, at the beginning of a session. Spending it allows you to re-roll a dice, basically. Levels go up to 10. At 10th level, the player character is at his adventuring peak. PCs gain a level after every other adventure, so you don't have to really bother tracking XP. It's very simple. At 5th and 10th level, players get to pick a feature, special ability, or feat that relates to their character class, either something pulled from a book or made up on your own. We get a very simple sort of how to create a player character, and we're told that you need to come up with a name, race, class, alignment, and something noteworthy about the character. You pick a race: human, dwarf, elf, halfling, gnome, or half-orc. Your PC has a racial ability that can be used once per session. There's 4 basic classes: fighter, wizard, cleric, and thief. The fighters get 10 hit points a level. They can add their level to both hit and damage rolls. Wizards or sorcerers get 4 hit points a level. They can use virtually any spell in the player's handbook that's equal to their level, but each spell cast drains a wizard of hit points equal to their spell level. Nice and simple, I like that. Clerics, spiritual knights, or templars get 8 hit points a level. They get a single invocation via touch that can be used anytime without penalty. At first level, they can cure wounds, healing 1d6 hit points. Alternatively, this divine energy can instead be used to harm demons, undead, and Lovecraftian abominations without them getting a save. The clerical ability goes up to 2d6 at 3rd level, 3d6 at 5th level, 4d6 at 7th level, and 5d6 at 9th level. A thief gets 6 hit points per level. They can do all the normal thief stuff, climb sheer surfaces, etc., and backstab. If it's routine, it can be done without rolling as long as the attempt is described. Trickier tasks are usually narrated and rolled as per the skill checks, which are detailed in a short while. To attack, you roll a d20 and hit your opponent's armor class or better. If using a magical weapon, you add the plus to the 2 hit roll. A natural 20 is a critical hit, resulting in double the normal damage, plus additional bonuses. Natural 1 is a critical miss, you're disarmed, prone, or outmatched, resulting in disadvantage on your next attack. So a slightly more simple version than what's offered earlier in the book. Armor class starts at 10 and goes up to a maximum of 20 without magical aid. Wizards can't wear armor. Thieves can add their level to AC if not wearing armor. Leather is +2, a shield is +2, a helmet is +1, chainmail is +4, scale mail is +5, and plate mail is +6. Weapon type doesn't matter as much as skill. Your damage depends on what your class is. Fighters do d10, clerics do 1d8, thieves do 1d6, and wizards do 1d4. There's 4 alignments: law, chaos, neutral, and unaligned, which are described very briefly. We're also told that you need to pick something noteworthy about your character: a background, possession, an appearance, a talent, something like that. And instead of automatically rolling a skill check, simply describe what you're doing. Perception and interaction will be role-played, otherwise the GM will let you know when to roll a skill check. Success requires a roll of 15 or better on a d20, adding your character's level to the roll if attempting something related to the PC's class, which puts me very much in mind of the game Castles and Crusades, which does something similar. Next we have a sort of miscellaneous tie-up for the Crimson Dragon section, where it tells you if you lose hit points and your level is between 0 and the negative equivalent of your player character level, you are simply unconscious and will recover. Once you go past that, so for instance minus HP if you're 4th level, the character is dead. A short rest of 45 to 60 minutes can be restorative. You get one of these a day, recharging hit points at XD6, where X is the character level. All hit points refresh after a full 8 hours of rest. PCs can use their action to assist another character, giving them advantage, must be narrated. Magic items must be attuned to an individual. It requires at least 15 minutes of uninterrupted concentration, at which point the item's owner knows what they do and how to use it. Saving throws are determined by subtracting a character's level or monster's hit dice from 20. You need to roll that number or better on a d20 to save. Natural 20 means you're unaffected. Epic feats of awesomeness can be attempted instead of your standard attack. Subtract the character's level from 30 and roll that number or better on a d30 to succeed. The result is whatever you described. And legitimate substantive questions are always welcome and usually have a 2 in 6 chance for a resounding yes. Example: does the robot head still talk after I ripped it off its body? Then we have a list of backers, some lovely artwork again, and an index. So, what did I think about Chult? Well, as I say, I actually really enjoyed reading the book, although I think people's mileage is going to depend on your your like or dislike of references to pop culture, the sort of zany humour that's in it, and the genre mashing that goes on in it. Now, for me, as I said earlier, I'm absolutely fine with putting anachronistic things into a game as long as it makes for a more enjoyable game. So I had no problems with that. The sort of odd references to pop culture, a few of them were a little bit more jarring than others, but nothing that caused me any serious issues, I suppose, when I came to run it. I mean, anything you don't like, you can always omit or just tweak, as with any module. But I found it really interesting. Like I say, it's sort of like a grab bag or sort of funhouse dungeon of stuff that the author likes. And whilst I'm not sure if I'd run the whole thing as a big campaign, as it's presented in the book, I would certainly dip into it to pull out elements from it. However, if I wanted to do a tournament game or something like that, or a convention game that went on for a little bit longer, I would definitely consider using Chult, because all of the tables it gives you in there support running repeated runs into the Black Pyramid. All of the adventures in there have tables designed to facilitate you getting into the meat of the action, so to speak, which I think is really what you need when you're running a game at a tournament or a convention. Chult is available for $10 PDF on DriveThruRPG. You get lovely JPEGs of the maps along with that. I'm not sure whether you can still get hold of a hard copy version of it. However, if you can, there will no doubt be details on Venger's old school gaming blog that I'll put a link to in the description of this video. So, in conclusion, if you're looking for a large funhouse dungeon that is useful for repeat visits and maybe even forming the basis of an entire campaign, and you're comfortable with the funhouse nature of sort of mashing things in from a lot of different genres, then I think you could do far worse than pick up a copy of Chult. And even if you're not going to run it as the weighty, squamous beast that it is, you can pull individual bits out of it that will be of great use, just to inject a little bit of that weirdness into your own game. So there we are. Hope you've enjoyed this video review of Chult. Like I say, I definitely consider it giving it a look. If anything you've heard earlier sounds like it might interest you. If you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, share and subscribe, and all that other good stuff that YouTubers routinely tell you to do. And hopefully we'll see you for the next one. So whatever game you're playing, whenever you're playing it, take care, and most importantly of all, have fun. We'll see you again.